someone in industry, so people were dealing with food security and they were from different countries. But here in George, it was based on a geography. And they ended up focusing just on Tembeletu. It was Jeanette, wherever Jeanette is. There she is, Jeanette and Andy and Nezzy, wherever okay, there's Nezzy, hey Nezzy. And Debbie Jordan, who's from Southern California, but quite involved here. And Sally, and I think that was it, right? And so, before this got going, you know, Sally came out of working with another nonprofit, and I said, before you jump into just doing something else, take some time to strategize, take some time to plan, take some time to think about what do you really want to accomplish over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And 30 would put you at 99. And so at that stage, we'll be pickling you. We'll have a whole pickling operation in Tembeletu, and that's how we're going to deal with you. So, now transformation is perhaps an overused word. Like other overused words, you've probably got your list of overused words you don't like mentoring, discipleship, curated. I hate that word, curated. And mandate, vision, passion. You know, you've got all of those things. But it doesn't negate either our first commission or the Great Commission. So we understand what the Great Commission is, at least the words, which is to make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. We understand the words of those things. But what was our first commission? Well, I'll save you the trouble because we've got 20 minutes until breakfast arrives. Our first commission was to work. I mean, we were put in the garden not because God needed a puppy, because he needed whackers. That's what he needed. And that's what he needed. He needed people who were going to take care of the planet, look after it, bring his design, bring his desires. And so Adam and Eve got to work with God. That's what they got to do. I grew up thinking work was punishment for sin, because when I did something wrong, I got more jobs. You know, so you try to stay out of trouble, otherwise you got to do all the jobs. Anyway, so that was my mother's theology. Work was punishment for sin. But I found out that there was work before there was sin. And God worked, Adam and Eve worked. He said the work was good. And so part of the big challenge, I was at a meeting of 650 CEOs in the US recently, including a bunch of people from Africa, and there were some guy, the ambassador from Mali or somewhere, or Liberia, was asking, what are the problems in Africa? And I started a civil war. I got up and I said, stop asking for stuff for free and regain the value of work. You have to understand that work is valuable. And God has given everybody. People used to ask me, I don't know what my calling is. Now I tell them, you're called to work. And it doesn't matter whether the Methodist Church is paying you or the painting company is paying you. It doesn't matter. We're all called to work. So that's a big deal. The more every time I shake my phone around, it says undo typing. I'm not typing. Okay. Yeah. So one of the partway through the Transforming Society training, the team over here formed Usapho, a non-profit. They didn't just jump into situations, but they began with a particular focus over here. Now in our training, we cover big topics like, in Afrikaans you call it MMWC, in the Luke chapter 10 you call it a man of peace or a person of peace, the main man what counts. You know, how do you find the main person in town and or in a situation? That's one of the things. We talked about spheres of influence. We have 10 of them. Just because I've got 10 fingers, and you know, education, healthcare, government, media, all of those things. We talked about giants in society. Now, we didn't start with the needs of society, but we also looked at the assets. What are the assets in George? What do you have in your hands? And I believe God has placed in every country, in every community, assets, because he is just. And so there are assets in George and in the greater George area, in Tembeletu, in the other communities, that are there for the transformation of those communities. It's not the history of this country. The assets of this country were taken out of the country so that the British Empire could expand and other empires before them. But God places in every nation the assets needed for the blessing of that nation and so that that nation can bless other nations. And that includes Tembeletu. There are assets in Tembeletu. If we approach Tembeletu as a problem or a need, we have a problem. There are assets there. And I'm very excited about what's being gone over there. So Nezi was one of the people who went through the training. Nezi, come over here. Gerrit and Estelle know my gift is getting other people to talk. Right, Gerrit? Yeah. So, by the way, Gerrit and Estelle are hiding up in the mountains up there. But they were leading our repurposing business training for many years up in the Johannesburg area before they saw the light and came down to the coast. So they're a great resource. Nezi, you went through the training.
Yes.
In 2 minutes, what did you learn, or what did it mean to you? What are the big takeaways?
For me, transformation, the big takeaway about transformation is that I'm working where God is working.
Okay.
I'm doing God's works, and I'm trained and equipped how to tackle the giants of my city. Before, I didn't know what the giants of Tembeletu and spheres and networking to be able to work with other organizations and people. The uttermost best for me, I know that my work is my worship, and also to transform people out of nothing to work.
So you're creating workers over there. So give me an example. How's that played out in Tembeletu? What have you seen come out of that?
What I've seen come out of that, I've seen change and transformation in the household. Most in the area that I'm staying in, most of the people are coming from disadvantaged families. They are having nothing, there is a drug abuse, there is violence. But as I'm telling you now, out of 14 households that we're working with, every household is having a food garden at the backyard. That is food security. Every child from that household is having a place to go after school, that is education center. Every parent is going for Bible study on Thursday to receive the word of God. And also we have our ABCD training to transform ladies to start more small businesses. And that is a big deal. And I believe that God wanted us to work in Tembeletu. But without being in the training of transformation, it was going to be difficult to face other spheres and to face the giants that we are facing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nezi. Awesome. Good job. The trick, you're going to speak somewhere, is to take Nezi, and you've got to understand they'll never invite you back. They only invite Nezi back after that. So that's the way it works over here. Yeah. So, Sally, why the focus on one street? I mean, there's plenty of streets in Tembeletu.
Yeah. This was very, very difficult for me to understand that God wanted us to just focus on one street with 14 households. Why? Because I'm used to quantity, feed 1,000 people. But what worried me is we didn't actually know the families that we were feeding, the families that we were working with. And God showed us very clearly through transformation. Keep it small and get to know your households. Get them to identify what their needs are. Not me come in and say, you have a problem in that area, your children need to be educated. Let them understand that they have the capacity to identify their needs and to actually change their situation. And God said to us, start where you are. And Nezi and Sipakazi live in zone 7 in the street, and God said, start in that street. That street is transformed. It's spotlessly clean. You'll see the statistics here. A year ago, 58% were unemployed. That's right down. We're waiting for our second assessments. And the majority of people are working because they've understood what their identity is and that their work is their worship.
Fantastic. Okay. So, by way of background, I'm a recovered chartered accountant. So I used to work at Pricewaterhouse for many years. And one of the things when we started doing repurposing business was we would try to document things as best we could. Sometimes it's hard. But to get a baseline assessment, we were introduced to green light. And Andy, come tell us, what is the green light movement and what did you guys assess?
So Ann Timms is actually the expert here about green line, so feel free to correct me.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic tool to know, are we making a difference in a numbers accounting kind of way, but just more than financial. There's 6 dimensions that this survey takes. It's housing and infrastructure, health and environment, income and employment, participation and organization and self-awareness and motivation. That's 6. Education and culture. That's it. So basically in those 6 dimensions, there's 50 questions with 3 possible answers. Green is I'm good to go, no problems. Yellow is I'm struggling. And red is I'm stuck and I need help. So basically the families that we survey will self-diagnose. They'll tell you what the issues are. And we'll have that in a narrative form, like what their story is, getting to know the households. But we'll also have this data that comes out. They'll have this that looks like green, yellow, red, and they'll have this for themselves and they'll keep this. But what happens is our 14 households, they put all that data together and come up with nice numbers that our accountants like. So yeah, it's just a baseline survey in the beginning. You go in a year afterwards and you say, are we making a difference?
Yeah. And not everything's going to get better, right? Some things might get worse because people become more self-aware, they're more tuned into their needs and so on. But you've got a baseline and you can build from there. And this is going deep. It doesn't sound like it's very broad, 14 households, but it then catches on from there. So those people begin to impact other people when they see those changes taking place. So that's wonderful. Okay, so what are some of the takeaways from today? 10 minutes to go. You guys ready? Okay, so one of the things that we're looking at is, actually, I remember being with Keratin is still up in the Santon area, and right next door is Alexandra. Right? And you've got this big disparity, and you can't really improve Johannesburg and Santon if you don't take care of or deal with the surrounding communities at the same time. There has to be a collaboration. The problem is, I've spent more time in a township in South Africa since I've lived in America than when I lived in South Africa. That's the reality. I mean, it was a place, if you've got half a brain, you avoid. You don't go in there. And I only figured out when I went into the townships, they don't walk around robbing each other in the townships. They're thinking about your place in George. They're not thinking about the place next door. It's quite a safe place to be on a Friday night. So I would encourage you to think, how do you transform the greater George community? And as Tembeletu goes, as the other areas go, so goes George. This is a group effort. And starting in Tembeletu is great, but we need to find some bridges. And this is one of the value adds that Usapho and their network will add is, how do you build a bridge? Because I'm sitting here, I've got a job, I'm an accountant, I'm in marketing, I do digital marketing, I'm in media, whatever. What can I practically do? So I've given you a little survey on your table over there. You've got this piece of paper in front of you. And I'd like to know, what are your competencies? I've listed some of the competencies needed to transform society. Now, I had a guy in Cape Town complaining that he has to Google what I'm talking about, but it should be pretty straightforward. But let me give you a couple. Okay, all right. So we need people who can dream. We get lots of those over here. Spirit-led spies. This is so that you can go and you can check out the land that's been going on. People who are grounded in the Word. Obviously, that's really, really important. Historical researchers. So one of the things that we challenged people to do during the training was find out the history of Tembeletu. What happened? What's the spiritual history? And they went to the museum, they went and spoke to local pastors, they found out all the drama, because you have to fix the foundations. You talk about your business, sometimes you have to go in, jack the whole house up, and redo the foundations. And so that's something over there. I'll just pick a couple of others. Okay, Kingdom Economist. Now, we're not talking about handouts. One of the things we're looking for Tembeletu is co-investors. Not just investors. What do I mean by that? Well, Catherine has got a plan, and she will provide all of the accounting. She's a proper accountant, not like me. And just to keep track of what's going on, but not just keeping track, because the people in Tambaladu have already started investing in each other. Where's Nezzy? Is that right? Okay, who's going to tell me about that? Okay. All right. I don't know where Nezzy's gone, but anyway. Sally, tell us. Okay.
So Anne over there is one of our partners, and I want to explain to you that currently we only have 3 staff members, and we are working with partners and people who want to co-work with us. And I think this is a huge, huge, huge benefit for us and for our partners. So the only staff members are myself and Sipakazi and Nessie who spoke. And we are embracing the community's gifts and talents. So Anne, who is very busy as a community developer and working in the corporate world, said, I will volunteer a Sunday afternoon to come to your community and run an ABCD training with your adults. That's asset-based, citizen-led development. And she started getting in there on the Sunday afternoon. They're committed. Sunday afternoons they're there in Pastor Matiti's church, which is down our street, and they're learning from Anne. Initially they said to her, I can't do anything. I don't know what my gifts are. I don't have skills. Well, by last week, I have to tell you just one story. One of our ladies who started working at the municipality, she's got a full-time job there, she came to Nessie and she said, here's 500 rand. I want to go to Soso because Soso wants to start a chicken business. And by Friday, we got the pagodas on our phone. The chicken business has started. They're investing in each other. She sold all her chickens. She's in business. She has a micro business and she's on her way. She thought she couldn't do anything. Anne's going to pick up at the next training in November and teach them what to do with their money, how to budget, and how to expand their business. Yeah. But everybody here, Anne is a nursing sister at Mediclinic. She came to me last year and she said, I want to volunteer. I'll give you X amount of hours in a week. Catherine's a full-time lecturer at NMU. She said, I will support you. I will give you X amount of time a week. Do you understand what's going on? So many people have come to us and said, Nina over there is so busy, she's a marketing buck. I don't do these fancy pamphlets and whatever. Nina takes it from me and she said, I will give you 2 or 3 hours a week and I will do your pretty stuff, your flyers. Use each other, expand the kingdom in that way. But our businesses are on the roll. So if you want chickens, just contact the supermarket. Live or dead.
Fantastic. Yeah, so leadership developers, one of the opportunities is for mentoring. We did something down in the Cape many years ago and found out that the business problems that people face in a township and that you face in your business, cash flow, dealing with employees, dealing with all of those things, access to market, it's a different scale, but it's the same problem. And to sit down with somebody and say, look, I'll have a cup of coffee with you every 2 weeks or once a month and talk through what's going on, invaluable to somebody. Anybody can do it. And by the way, you might say, well, I'm not in business, I don't have a big business, I work in corporate. It doesn't matter. If you've got a bank card, you've got a checkbook, you can be of use to them. So that's really, really important. I would say, bringers of order. That's the last one on the list over here. I love Colossians chapter 2 verse 5, where Paul says, I delight to see how orderly you are and how firm your faith is. And order and faith go together. If you bring any order, any structure into your business, into your household, into your family, you have the capability to add value and to do that. Welcome. So I want to encourage you to think through. If you're not sure, you say, look, I'm a ballerina or whatever, and I'm not quite sure how my skill sets fit in. Have a conversation and figure out what that might be. But this is not just, my company gives, 2% of profits away. I mean, look, Catherine will set up a fund and it'll be great to have an investment fund. It will be great to acquire some properties that can be leased out to people who are doing their gardens. It's good to have some of those things going on. And it's good to have a capital base. There also needs to be a leadership base. There also needs to be spiritual capital. You might say, I can commit to pray. I'll pray for these people. Give me the names of the households. Give me the names of the businesses. I'll do that if that's something that you're able to do. So the other thing is, it would be great to have more people who have a shared common language around these things. And so we have lots of training that is going on. There's the ABCD stuff that Anne's doing, which is fantastic. We have repurposing business training, how to get a business into God's business, not how to get God into your business. If you want God in your business, don't pray that prayer, He'll send you a problem. Then everybody wants God in their business when they got a problem. But the bigger question is, how does your business support God's business? How do you understand what God's doing in the world and work with Him? We have another training starting next year on transforming society. Just a useful set of tools if you want to do that in your company, in your organization, in your school. We also have training on kingdom economics. What does biblical economics look like? So the economic systems of the world are in trouble. And one of the things that we were just chatting with Anne about is something they call LETs, or local exchange trading systems, where you have the Tembeletu dollar or whatever you have, or you have currency that circulates locally. Our Muslim friends circulate 1 rand 11 times before it leaves the community. The Jewish people do it 7 times. So 1 rand will get spent in the community 7 times before it goes out. Christians, once. Yeah, and it's a bit of a problem. So we need to figure out how we have what they call economics of mutuality, or a circular economy where people can support each other. So there's stuff to learn on kingdom economics, and then of course we always do stuff around leadership and other things. So there are things that can be done. There are ways for you to plug in different off-ramps with training, with supporting from a volunteer perspective, mentoring people, getting down. So I'm excited about what's happening, getting down to Timberlake. My kids are like, Dad, finish your sentences. I figured you would know that. I'm excited what's going on. I'm excited with what Jabir and Anne are doing in their businesses. Companies who are thinking, how do I leverage my balance sheet, my employee base, my skill sets to get involved with what God is doing. I'm excited to see people who understand that work is worship, that business is ministry, that the majority of us are called to the marketplace statistically. There's only a few chosen frozen like Pete over here who are paid to be good. The rest of us are good for nothing, as they say. And but each of us has a ministry, each of us has a calling, and we can, if our skill sets, if our assets are woken up, we can tackle the big problems in society. Do not rely on government to take down the giants in South Africa. Don't rely on government. Don't rely on the non-profit sector to create jobs. Non-profit doesn't give birth to for-profit that often. It can happen, but not often. It's the business people, the working men and women. We have to take ownership of these areas, of these responsibilities, say, what can we do to create 1 job, 5 jobs, 10 jobs, to spin off other businesses. I'll wrap up just by saying I was at a church in California. It was their 50-year birthday of the church. And they trotted out this whole slideshow. And it was like, we met in a living room, we bought a small church, we bought a bigger church, now we built a big church, and then we bought the sports complex across the way. And I went to them and I said, 50 years old and you don't have any kids yet. That's a pretty bad story, right? I heard the real estate story, but what's the real story? What are you producing? God might not want your business to become the biggest business in George, but how about your business spinning off entrepreneurs, other businesses, starting other businesses? Right? How do you replicate yourself? How do you send what you have into the communities around George and into other parts of South Africa and Africa? God is an expansionist. I'm not saying we're exporting Western capitalism, but I am saying God is an expansionist. And we need to get the answers from Him and be on a growth path, because if we wait for the government or non-profits or other sectors to solve the problem, we're going to have a long wait.